Hey guys, happy Tuesday. I hope all of you had a great Monday and are ready to get back to work here today. I am excited about talking about a few things today with you, as well as going over a few things that I think will help you with your 13 Colonies brochure. And just will be a good step forward in what we have been learning in social studies this year. Um, First off, if you are at home, I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to seeing you soon. If you are at school, I definitely am not there, obviously, and I hope you are being good for the sub and making sure that you're respectful and a good fifth grade Mill Creek student. So let's go ahead and get started for today. Yesterday we did not do quote of the week, so I thought we'd start with that today. And the quote of the week this week is a good one. It says, "Mistakes are proof you are trying." So, what does that? What is the meaning of this quote to you? Do you agree with this quote? And how does it relate to you and your world? So, if you're at home, I want you to pause this video and maybe jot down the answer to these three questions. If you're at school, pause this video and discuss it. The sub will kind of lead you in these three questions, have a good discussion about this quote. So I'll give you just a few minutes to do that, and then we will get started with the rest of the lesson. So go ahead and pause it now. All right, guys. I hope you had a good discussion. You were able to talk about this quote just a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started for today. And first thing I wanted to talk about is your brochure. I hope you're have gotten started. If you haven't, it's not too late. But I wanted to give you some more things to help you with figuring out how you want to set up and complete your brochure. So the easiest thing to do is Google 13 Colonies brochure. When you Google it, you're going to have all these different things show up. Now, some of them have different criterias, but they still can give you a good idea of what I will be looking for. And you'll see some were done on the computer, some were hand-drawn, they colored pictures. All of those are great, okay? There's no right or wrong way when it comes to the format. Remember, yesterday we talked about the template that you can get. But also, when I was searching for some examples, I came across this website. And so I wanted you to have access to it. So you can click it. When you click it, it pops up 13 College Brochure Project. This is for an older class. And so it's a little bit more in depth, but there's a lot of good things that you can use. So it has where you can how making a brochure. You click on that, it will give you different ways for you to sorry, it did not like that, but let me go back. Anyways, I'm not going to click anything. It's probably because I'm recording. But anyways, you can look at all these different ways for you to set up the brochure, and it tells you things. It still wasn't the right page. Here we go. It gives you information, and another way that you can. They did it with a computer, and they tell you exactly what to put. The front cover, put the colony's name, state slogan, illustration. Then it breaks it up into parts. And the parts are very similar to what we had on our 13 Colonies project sheet that has all the information on it. So here we go: economics, geography, religion, culture, all those things that you have to have. And this is kind of like a good outline showing, oh, on this page I'm going to do this, on this page I'm going to do that. It has a map showing different things, the geography. I don't know. It's just a good thing that you can go through and kind of look at to help you along the way. You don't have to use it at all. I just thought it was a good tool that you could possibly use if you choose to do so. With that being said, there also when you go to the 13 College brochure, one that popped up from me was on Pinterest, and this one is, you look at it and you're like, they didn't take their time. Oh yeah, look at it. They took their time. They have a colored background. They have great illustrations. But really, what I'm looking at is it neat? Yes. Does it have information that pertains to the project? Yes. It's covering the different criteria that are set. So rather, if you feel more comfortable doing it by hand or doing it on a computer, that's completely up to you. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I have no preference whatsoever. But looking through some of these different things that will help you in making your brochure. So yesterday, last thing, if you have any questions, definitely email me and let me know, and I will help you as much as possible. If you have any downtime in class, you can also always work on your project, and as well as at home. While you're at home, you should have plenty of time to do so. So 13 colonies. Yesterday, we talked about the different leaders of the 13 colonies. They were either founders or they were people that were sent over by the king to start and begin these colonies that were to help the king. And so today I want to kind of talk about the government, how government was run in the 13 colonies. And we kind of started talking about that a little bit in one of our entries, and we'll go over that entry here in a few minutes. But I wanted you to see how, the colonies, a lot of them left the colonies for religious freedom, but did they still have the government from the King of England controlling them? And then, of course, the ones that were sent over there by the king, how were they governed? So I found this video on the King of England and the British, and it kind of goes back before the colonial time, and it goes all the way up to where we are talking about now. So let's watch this together, and then we will move on from there.
Now I know what you're thinking. The America we know became an independent country in 1776 after it won this war against England. And we won all these freedoms and liberties that allow us to watch Netflix all weekend in our PJs eating ice cream. But that's kind of getting ahead of the story. The America we know, the one with freedoms and ice cream, really started even further back. In England. It really started with a king who was very powerful. King John of England. More power. A little more power. There we go. Yeah, that's a lot of power. He could pretty much do anything he wanted. He got in fights with the Pope. He ate giant turkey legs. He lost some land to France and made people pay higher taxes. Yeah, it was pretty good to be the king. But it wasn't super great being anybody else. In fact, it was pretty crummy. So much so that in 1215 AD, the rich men of England, the earls, the dukes, and the counts, decided to try to get back some of the power from the king. But he was stubborn, so there was a little skirmish. But eventually, King John gave in, and on June 19th, 1215, King John signed the historic Magna Carta. Why is it historic, you ask? Well, it was the first formal document stating that a king had to follow the laws of the land. and it guaranteed the rights of individuals against the wishes of the king. This meant people couldn't be arrested, imprisoned, or have their possessions taken away, except by judgment of the equals and or by the law of the land. But things just kept getting better. By 1265, a lawmaking group called Parliament was created. Their job was to approve laws and taxes proposed by kings and queens. But what they did was just as important as how they were chosen. Parliament was made up of elected officials, lords and barons at the time, who would speak for the needs of the people and were to ensure that the king couldn't have a crazy amount of absolute power. This setup protected citizens from having to pay super high taxes unfairly to prevent silly laws that only benefited certain groups from being passed. It also gave these common citizens a chance to voice their needs to the king in a more civilized way. No more need for these bloody rebellions. Yet, this is an example of a representative democracy. Quite simply, that means eligible citizens choose representatives to speak for them. But this wasn't the first time we'd seen it. Thanks, Rome! Okay, so now you're up to speed on English government. Time to start colonizing. Now, I know when you think of colonial times, you think of pilgrims and Mayflowers and Turkey. Trust me, we'll get there. But first, we have to talk about charters. No, not carters, charters! It's kind of a universal rule that kings always want one thing: more power! Maybe because some have been taken away at some point. Who's to say? The way for a king to get more power is to get two things: more land and more money. But how does a king get those things? Luckily for the king, King Henry VIII at the time, a man by the name of John Cabot, an Italian explorer who happened to live in England, decided he would follow in Christopher Columbus's footsteps and explore the West. He followed so closely in his footsteps that he too thought he had landed in Asia, but later realized he had landed on new land, the eastern coast of present-day America, and claimed it in the name of England. Fast forward to 1606, when King James I was ruler of England. He had a bunch of English citizens who were bored in England and wanted to venture to the New World. Most wanted to explore for three reasons: money, politics, or religion. A lot of people had heard stories of gold in the New World and wanted to check it out. Others heard of some sweet trade action from all the new resources, but more on that later. In terms of politics, many people wanted to help expand the British Empire by settling land and building colonies before other countries had the chance. Side note, at this point in time in history, there were three global superpowers: England, France, and Spain. They all wanted more power, so they all tried to get more land so they could all make more money so they could all have more power. Needless to say, they didn't get along very well. Finally, others wanted to colonize for good old-fashioned religion. Some of them traveled in the name of the Church of England and wanted to spread the faith of Christianity. Others traveled because they felt persecuted in England and sought religious freedom, like the Puritans and the Pilgrims. See, I told you we'd get to them. Whatever the reason for exploration, money, land, or God, these people weren't allowed to just pick up and go. They needed permission from the king. A charter! This was an agreement that the king would allow these people to settle in the New World as long as they made money for England and stayed loyal to the crown. Easy, right? There are three types of charters: royal, proprietary, and colonial. All were owned by the king, but each varied in who had primary governmental power. Think of them on a spectrum of independence. A royal colony was ruled directly by the English monarch. The king appointed the governor and a council to assist him with the government of the colony. Each colony had their own elected parliament, but the king still had the final say. New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were all royal charters. Proprietary colonies were colonies granted by the English crown to one or more proprietors, who had the full governing rights. A proprietor was a person granted governmental power over a tract of land. The land was titled in the name of the proprietor, not the king. Proprietary colonies were run under a colonial charter agreement, which was reviewed by the ruling monarch. Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware were all proprietary colonies. A colonial charter granted the colony a self-governing right, and the charters were granted to the colonists as opposed to proprietors or king-appointed governors. All of the colonial charters guaranteed the American colonists the vague rights and privileges of Englishmen, which would later prove to be a critical point of contention, especially in Massachusetts, and one of the major causes of the American War for Independence. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island were all colonial charters. Over time, all of the colonies would eventually become royal colonies, but some of them put up more of a fight than others. Spoilers!
All right, guys. She talked really fast, and there was a lot of cool pictures to kind of keep you engaged. But there was some good information in there that kind of was talking about the three types of governments, or how the charters, really not the governments, the three charters that were used, and those were royal, proprietary, and colonial. The colonial was the least governed. That means the colonists kind of ruled the places. These were probably the least populated areas, and in my opinion, probably had the least economic value to the king. Because remember, it talked about with the king that it was all about land and money, right, to get power. So power, land, money, that was how the kings of England worked. And pretty much back then, that's what all the countries over there were trying to do. But England was obviously one of the most powerful ones of them all. And the way the king saw it is, the more colonies he had, the more money he could make, and the more powerful he would become. And so when these 13 colonies were being created, they were by charters. And the royal charters, which all of them became a royal charter, which she said, spoiler alert, which is one reason why these 13 colonies were um, uh, going to one day rebel against the king. But like I was saying, there were these colonists that created, that helped the king, and they were either the loyal in the royal colonies, or the proprietary, which we kind of talked about the other day when we were looking at the government. So the colonies were, this was in our notebook. And when you think about this, I forgot what activity it is. I don't have my notebook with me. But the proprietary, it was given by the king to an individual or company, could later become a royal colony. So a good example of this would be North Carolina and South Carolina. We talked about this yesterday. They were proprietary. Remember, it was a group of people that were in charge of those colonies. An example of the royal colonies were New York and Massachusetts, places where the king kept his hand on that at all times. And then there were, of course, the charters were granted to these three types: the self government, the proprietary, and the royal. Self government is another word for colonial. That was talked about in the video. So look at the self-government one. The king was so far away, the colonists were left to govern themselves. Each colony had a governor, but really, let me pause. Really, what was happening there is the king was like, "You're not your value. The value of your land and where your colony is not worth governing. It wasn't worth him keeping a thumb." We talked about the thumb, keeping a thumb on them. It was more of just like, here's some land. Maybe we'll need you later down the road. Each colony had a governor, council, and body of representatives called an assembly. This government was similar to the English government, with its king and two houses of parliament. So as you look at it, guys, this is, if you think about it, if you kind of do a compare and contrast to the English government, the government in England, and then actually compare it and contrast it to the government that we have now. It was kind of right in between, which really that's what it was. They were in between governments. They weren't governed by the English, and they weren't yet under American America wasn't created yet. The governor of each colony was appointed by the king, though. So there's where the thumb was still on the colony. So the king would pick his friends, or pick people that were loyal to him, to oversee all the colony activities. Members of the council were also appointed, usually by the king or by the governor. So the people that were in charge were loyal to the king of England. and had England's um, best interest at heart. Council members were wealthy and well respected. They were the high end of the system right there, where they were wealthy in England and they were wealthy in the 13 colonies. So it wasn't like they were appointed to go over there. They weren't going over there to find wealth. They were not going over there for religious freedom or opportunity. They were going because they were appointed by the king. Members of the assembly were elected by the colonists and set taxes because it directly represented the colonists. So, let me read that one more time. Members of the assembly were elected by the colonist. So the assembly is kind of lower than the council, where the colonists had a little bit of a voice. But remember, only back then it was very few people really had a voice. It said the colonists, but it was a very select few of colonists that had a voice, and they were set taxes that represented the colonists. So it was kind of like they were trying to let the colonies get to start creating their own self-government. But if you look between the lines or look behind the curtain, the king was still in control. So yes, there was royal. Yes, there was proprietary. Yes, there was colonial. They were all chartered by the king. But the king really controlled all three. And like it said on the video, eventually all of those colonies would become royal colonies, and which kind of really will lead into what the king started to do. And keep this word in mind as we get into the next couple of days as taxes. Taxes will end up being a big thing that the colonists did not like, and the money going over to England. And so England was, the king was doing exactly what he wanted. He wanted the king the king of England wanted control for power, for land, for money. So that was a little confusing. I got a little tongue-tied, but we got through it. It is a lot different talking to a video or a camera rather than talking to you and discussing. So hopefully I wasn't too boring. But anyways, getting back to it, I hope that you understand that a little bit better. We're going to start looking at, now that we know what the colonies were like, we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and start thinking about getting closer and closer to why there was a Revolutionary War. Why were these colonies starting to break apart? And we'll kind of look at that in the next few days. So, with that being said, I hope all of you have a great rest of the day. What I would like for you to do now is, after this video is over, I would like for you to watch CNN 10. And on CNN 10, if you are at school, you will need to do a 3-2-1. Remember, 3-2-1 will need to be done if you're at school, and you'll turn that in. If you're at home, just watch CNN 10 and then kind of just jot down your 3-2-1s. But I will not need that to be. You don't have to turn that in, so you can just watch it mainly. So I hope you have a great day. I miss you guys. Hope to see you very soon. And we'll talk to you later.